So when you're working with somebody, before you start your NKT, you were talking about, might do some range of motion or different things. And like in level 1, David will show people different range of motion tests or different, single leg stance or different assessments that are kind of, not necessarily NKT muscle tests. They're sort of, as I phrase them, non-NKT assessments that you might do, your orthopedic assessments or things like that. How much of that do you do to kind of guide your NKT? And are there any really specific ones that are just your essential tests that maybe you always do with people that you could share with us?
Yeah, so I am always, in every session I'm looking at that. I feel like it's a really good before and after. And that's, I think, one of the biggest struggles that people have starting out with NKT is like how it can seem weird to people. It's like, all right, you want me to hold this and then I'm touching here and now it's better. And it just can be, especially like if you're not getting people coming to you, just like blindly trusting you, and you have to kind of explain more to them and kind of get them on board. It helps to have a before and after. Like everybody can relate to like, oh, okay, yeah, when I can only raise my shoulder to here, now I can raise it to here, or like I can't get my arm behind my back, now I can. But the thing is, like, so I'll use orthopedic testing and NKT testing, like perturbation and even just certain tests that I just know are going to fail on people. Like there's no way they can cheat. Like they're not going to be able to hold their leg up for a psoas test, and use that as before and after too, because it's a big deal for someone to in their body that they can't hold a limb up, and now all of a sudden they can, and it's easy. So so I use both. But as far as specifics for the orthopedic test, my background before coming into NKT was like Eric Dalton and Ben Benjamin and Whitney Lowe, and kind of like the big hitters in the ortho clinical, James Lasowski, massage world. So any of their stuff, I would highly recommend. I know Whitney Lowe has a pretty good book of just laying out a bunch of different kinds of orthopedic style assessments and different ranges of motion. So yeah, I like all of that stuff, because again, the goal is if the joints aren't moving properly, then of course things aren't going to be functioning properly neurologically. So you need to get both things online. And sometimes, you do one NKT correction or a couple good corrections, and then boom, all of a sudden the joint's back online. But knowing what's normal, just like with NKT, like knowing, okay, what's a normal response and what's an abnormal response. Same thing applies with the range of motion and being able to use the orthopedic style testing to know what's normal. Because if you don't know what's normal, you don't know what's deviating from that. And then you're just like, well, this is doing this, but what's it supposed to be doing? I don't know. If you don't know, then you don't really know what to do about it. So
yeah. When somebody comes into your office for the first time and they just don't know anything about NKT, how do you describe NKT to them, or what are some of your initial tests that you might do, or some tests that you never would do? What's your new client experience with NKT like?
Yeah, so what I tell them is it's a way to check and see how the brain is talking to the body. And I usually give some analogies and some examples just that I think that they're going to relate to. Like I'll tell people that the nervous system, to simplify it, kind of works like a light switch. Like things should be on, like the light should turn on when you flip the switch on. It should turn off when you turn the switch off. And sometimes it kind of gets stuck in between. I used to play this game when I was a kid. I had like light switches that operated the same light at the top and bottom of the stairs. But like if you had one in the middle, you get to the top and it doesn't work. So there's lots of ways to have interference so that things aren't just clear cut on and off. And that in order for us to move, like for me to move my arm like this, everything that makes it go back that way has to allow for this to happen. So it's just a system that checks to see how the brain organizes those movements, so that we can move efficiently and kind of go more towards that end of the spectrum of maximum efficiency. So I let them know that it's not a strength test, that it's just to see how the brain is connecting to things, and what kind of responses we're getting, so we can get more efficient movement and less pain.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
When you first started out learning NKT, and I mean, NKT can be complicated, so maybe you still get in these places sometimes. I know that I do. But whenever you hit a point where you were in a session with somebody doing NKT and you found yourself incredibly confused and you thought, oh, wow, I don't know where to go from here. I don't know I lost my place of what I was just doing, or I don't know where to go next, or you just feel like you are confused in your testing. Did you ever have like a way to kind of reset or bring clarity, or what were some of the next things that you learned were good to do to clear up confusion that you might have had in your testing?
Yeah. So even though on the inside I felt like I wanted to run out of the room and cry,
Yeah.
stayed in the room, stayed in the room. And basically what I learned how to do was just go back to, okay, what did I do before I knew how to do any of this? What's my goal right now? What am I trying to achieve? And just basically go backwards a little bit, to just do something that I knew that would still be working towards the goal that I had in mind, but then got confused and didn't know what was happening because I overwhelmed myself with all the testing or got confused by the results. So that I was still making progress towards the goal, even though just going about it in a different way. And as I progressed through the levels, that's kind of what I would do. Like level 2 stuff, you know, I'm trying to tie things together and the subsystems and this and that and the jaw and how's this go. And then I'm like, crap, I like don't even know what's going on right now. So it's like, okay, well, let's just like kind of back up to like level 1 thinking and sort of do that. And the same thing, level 3, it's like, okay, I confused with stuff. Let's kind of just go back to the basics. So whether that's an earlier level of NKT that makes sense to you, it's just like automatic and you don't have to think about, whether when you're first starting NKT, going back to whatever it is that you were doing before you knew NKT, because running out of the room crying is like not not a good option.
Yeah. What are, and when you've worked with other students and helped them learn, what are some of the common things that they might become confused on, or common mistakes that they make? And do you have any tips to help them overcome those mistakes?
Yeah, so when you're testing and starting out, and just like tips for just starting out, I think that remembering that whatever you knew how to do is still good information, and just kind of think about however you would normally go about things, and then say, well, what can I do with NKT? And like pick a test or a couple tests in an area, instead of like abandoning everything that you knew and thinking you have to figure everything out just with NKT testing, that you can't palpate anymore, you can't use your logic and reasoning or use any other assessments. And I think that really minimizes the overwhelming things that happen, and just being frustrated and kind of getting anxious because you're still using your same thought process and just kind of like interjecting the NKT testing instead of abandoning everything you know, and like only trying to figure things out using NKT testing. But yeah, and just being very deliberate and very accurate, not testing things differently, realizing that you're testing things differently. I see that quite a bit in classes where people will test from one side of the table, and then they go and test from the other side of the table, and they're getting different results, and they think the test changed, but really it did, because they're not testing the same thing, because there are force vectors coming from a different place. So just being accurate, slowing down, and really trying to pick and choose things to test based on all of the other logic and reasoning that you've been using prior to learning NKT.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, I got a couple more questions here for you, and you kind of mentioned one a little bit. I'm curious, what are just some great books and resources that you've been able to read and learn? You mentioned a couple people, and I think you mentioned a book earlier, but what are some things that really helped you to understand NKT or motor control, or that just you read these things and you realized, oh, this kind of gives me more direction of what to do with my NKT, or helps me understand it a little better? Are there any books you could recommend like that?
I guess like book wise, nothing's really coming to mind off the top of my head, but what I would do is I would go on, what is it, like the NCBIH or whatever, like the
I know which
journal.
one you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, whatever one that is, and read things about that. And honestly, things that people post on the scholars page, articles about, I would look at those, read those. A thing that was really helpful for me actually starting out is I would read through that stuff that people posted. Then that would kind of give me some ideas of what to search for on my own. And then also the pro tips that Thomas posted. Not all of them go in a lot of detail, but there's a search function in the scholars page, in all of the pages. And if you just say pro tips, it brings up a bunch of them. And there's some things in the files section, and it just like the way he describes things just makes sense to me. And I know there's like certain people that just the way they say things and describe things, it makes sense. I started also on Kathy Dooley on her website, all of her Anatomy Angel like posts that she does. There's a search function too, and I would search Anatomy Angel, read all of that stuff. Found that very, very helpful. So it's kind of more doing things like that, not necessarily books. If I think of something, I'll post it on the Scholars pages or something like that. But for right now, nothing really comes to mind as far as the reading more about motor control.
Yeah. Last question here. If you had like a slogan or a motto that you keep in your head and that reminds you of like some key principles that you do, or like the Caylon bumper sticker that you put on your car or something like that, what are some things just in like a sentence that are, your easy advice to remembering how to do things well in NKT or just in your practice in general even?
Yeah, so my thing, like one of my, I guess, slogans or whatever you want to call it on my business, on the back of my business card, it says "Get back to neutral." So neutrality is a big thing for me for a lot of reasons. One is as far as with a person, like the whole goal is having the body have kind of an experience to where it remembers how it used to do things when it did things correctly and efficiently. So getting back to that point. And that's what I think of as neutral, as being like, if you just find a comfortable position to sit in and like nothing feels like it's like nagging or grabbing or pinching, and you just feel like you feel nothing, basically. You just feel neutral because everything in your body is just comfortable at rest. So that aspect of it, as far as working with people, and that's the goal, is to get them back to that space. But then also for me, when I'm working with people, staying neutral, not thinking that I want certain things to happen and accidentally kind of influencing the testing. Learned a lot about that from Thomas Wells and the palpation course, his advanced palpation NMT course, and just kind of more information about that and how important it is as a practitioner to keep a neutrality. So just again, back to that accuracy of everything. So yeah, those are that. Like getting back to neutral and staying neutral and all of that stuff for me in those different applications is probably what I think about the most. And I mean, the body and the brain have an incredible power to heal itself and remember how to do things. So it's kind of like, all right, let's get you back to this state where those neurons can reconnect again and you get that pattern back.
Right.
So yeah. That's pretty much, that would be the big thing for me that I'm thinking about. And I'll actually think that in session. I'll say, okay, stay neutral, or I'm neutral, or things surrounding neutral. I'll kind of have that as a mantra sometimes, and to keep me present on what I'm doing without, like I said, getting too involved to where things are kind of getting more influenced, and just trying to stay really, really accurate and focused and just staying neutral.
Yeah. No, that's great to remember. All right. Well, Caylon, thanks so much for being here and giving everybody your advice. We really appreciate it. It's awesome to learn from all of your experience. It's been really great. So thanks so much for being here.
Of course. Yeah. I like to, it's good to talk about some of the failures and the frustrations, because I know people say that on the Scholars page. We talk about all the successes and all these great things, but everybody struggles at some point or another, and even going through the process. So yeah, just don't give up. That would be my parting words. There were a few times where I felt like I was going to go in a different direction and not even really do manual therapy anymore, and was kind of looking into some other things, and ended up sticking with it. And I'm really glad that I did. So it really pays off. It's hard work, but if you really dig your heels in and just accept that you're going to get frustrated, you're going to have failures, you're going to knock it out of the park sometimes, and just the capacity to really help people and change their lives within this community, and also just out in the outside world of having people get their lives back and be able to do things without being in agonizing pain is pretty powerful. So don't give up. Definitely challenging, but it's totally worth it to do everything that you can to stay involved and just keep progressing yourself.
Yeah. Caylon, it's been an honor. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Brandon.